and welcome to the Friday show. It is Stand Up Light, and what that means is I don't do the big old news segment at the top, which is what I do Monday through Thursday, but Thursday nights I hang out with Stand Up subscribers, and that is what we did last night, but I'm taping this before, so I don't know how well it went, but I'm looking forward to it tonight. And thank you very much for listening this week. Great week episodes. Thanks to all my guests, Bill B. and Dr. Aaron Carroll yesterday, Barry Ritholtz and Tom Hartman, Dr. Brian Rosenwald, Maura Quint, and even former Congressman Doug Collins, who elicited quite a response. Anyway, it was a great week. Can't do it without your support. StandUpWithPete.com. Sign up now if you haven't. I hope you had a good week. I hope everything is okay as things change each and every day. I hope that you're okay. I hope that I can check in with you. I appreciate your support, and so many of you have become friends to me here on this podcast. Why am I just babbling and prattling on? It's the Friday show. Let me get to my guests, okay? I have Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg, who will join me on April 3rd, by the way, at the Howland Center in Beacon, New York. Tickets are available for that show. Links to tickets in the show notes. I know several listeners that are already coming. Looking forward to that show April 3rd, Saturday, April 3rd. But I also have on today's show historian Kenneth C Davis. And wow, what a relevant and important historical conversation from the history of the Soviet Union and Ukraine to the annexation of Austria and why that is relevant to just strong men and the history there. He has written a whole book about it. So that is the show, and I'm very excited to have you joining me. Kenneth C. Davis is first, so what else can I tell you about him? Just go get his books, don'tknowmuch.com. He's really an amazing historian, an amazing writer. I've got all his books: Bible, Civil War, Geography, American Presidents, Americans' Hidden History, More Deadly Than War. Don't know much about mythology. So much good stuff. Hire him for your class, your library, your organization. Don'tknowmuch.com. Follow him on Twitter, where he's excellent, by the way, at Kenneth C. Davis. Always a pleasure to talk to this great man, and today was no exception. So here we go. Okay, there he is, my favorite historian, and he better be yours. Don'tknowmuch.com. Well, I just mentioned it all. Kenneth C. Davis, so good to see you. The day after St. Patrick's Day, we should have done the history of St. Patrick's Day. My fault. Hi.
Good morning, Pete, and I am still wearing my green tie. I should be audibly green to the listening audience there. And the first thing that comes to mind, of course, on St. Patrick's Day to me is that 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, I was screaming, how can they allow the St. Patrick's Day parade to go on in New York City?
Right.
You know, it was really not until I think March 11th or 12th that the New York City called off the St. Patrick's Day parade in 2020. While the rest of the world was really on fire. And it's really then within a few days that we have the first outbreak in New York, followed by the first death in New York, followed by March 15th, I think it was. It was actually March 13th was the last day of school for a lot of kids. By the following Monday, school was shut down. So St. Patrick's Day rings in my mind as an awful day of remembering where we were 2 years ago. And in my worst imaginings, knowing what had happened with 1918 and the flu pandemic then and parades in places like Philadelphia, I could not imagine that 2 years later, we'd be talking about 1 million dead Americans and, of course, an enormous scale around the world. And obviously, the news out of Europe and Ukraine has really pushed the pandemic to the sidelines. And a lot of people would like to, wish it away. I'll be the skunk at the garden party and say, I'm still extremely nervous. So I'm watching these numbers in places like Hong Kong and Shanghai, and they are going to move from there. These are major global commercial centers. They're going to move there back to Europe, and they already have. And I think it's only a matter of time before they move here. Now, are we better protected than we were
right.
2 years ago?
The game changer is that, of
absolutely,
course.
Absolutely. But we are not fully protected. So I personally am still taking a very, very cautious stance. We still wear our masks when we go outdoors. We still wear our masks when we go to the supermarket. So I hate to be the one who says this, but we're not out of this yet. So everybody, let's be careful.
Well, the point of, the March 13th, you mentioned those dates in 19 and the parade. Obviously, you wrote a whole book about the Spanish flu of 1918, of course. But, I think that's probably a New York-centric date to some extent, because New York was ground zero for COVID and was so shattered and so much death there at the beginning. Like the rest of the country probably doesn't have this time of year earmarked for, maybe they do. I guess things closed down pretty much. Doesn't matter. Either way, I'm glad you brought that up. It's an important, obviously, date. What about give me one or two fun facts about St. Patrick's Day that are significant and impactful. Yesterday, I gave some that aren't, like how much Guinness gets drunk. But there are a whole bunch more Irish. The diaspora is so much larger around the world, especially here in America, than in Ireland itself. I thought that was interesting. But give me some history. This is an over 200-year-old holiday.
It's a very old holiday, and the first parade was, in fact, the first American St. Patrick's Day was in parade was in New York City. I forget the date, but it's a very, very old parade here. And when it started out, because I always bring these things back to history, everyone wants to be Irish for the day. Unfortunately, I think that certainly in New York City around the parade, it is too much of a drinking holiday. I think that's a sad impact. When I think of Ireland, I think of poetry and literature and the beauty of Ireland. I've been there. It is an extraordinary place. I have some Irish ancestry, as my wife does. So when we went to Ireland, we did really feel that pull. But when I think of Ireland, first of all, for St. Patrick, patron saint, not born there, brought there as a slave. Captured by pirates, brought to Ireland and worked as a child. Later returned after he converted to Christianity, and with the aim of converting the pagans of Ireland to Christianity. And the lore, of course, is that he somehow chased the snakes out of Ireland. We know archaeologically and from paleontology that there were never snakes in Ireland that I'm aware of. If someone can refute that, I don't know. But there may never have been any snakes in Ireland, so there were none to chase out. But the real impact to me of Irish in America is really the image. As I said, everyone wants to be Irish for a day in March, but for a very long time, the Irish, and particularly Irish Catholics, and most Irish who came to America were Catholic, they were the most hated minority group in this country, although they quickly became one of the largest minority groups in this country. So when we talk about the history of anti-immigration in this country, you almost have to begin with the hatred that was expressed towards the Irish. That actually turned murderous in many instances. I write about this in one of my books, A Nation Rising. There were what were known as the Bible riots in Philadelphia in the 1830s because the Irish who were in Philadelphia had actually asked to have a different Bible other than the King James Version read in public schools, because they read the Bible in public school in those days, because the King James Version was known by many Irish Catholics to be anti-Catholic. This was the fight between Protestants and Catholics in America at that time. And because of this, there were actually riots in the street of Philadelphia. People were killed, houses were burned. It's not something that they, usually tell you when you go down to visit Philadelphia and see the Liberty Bell, and they talk about city of brotherly love. It was anything but that. So to me, when I think of Irish in America, this wonderful heritage, this wonderful pride in so many things that the Irish did in this country. But this is the dark side of it, that they were once the hated immigrants who were dirty, diseased, and dangerous. You know, the 3 Ds that we hurl at immigrants throughout history and including today. So it's always important, I think, to remember that. And certainly when we think about a group like the Knights of Columbus, a group really formed to defend the rights of Irish and Italian immigrants in the early 20th century, because they faced such incredible discrimination in this country. The signs in Boston used to be, you think of Boston as this Irish town with the Boston Celtics, which should be Celtics, by the way.
Right.
But there were once signs in the shops that said "No Irish need apply." So that's part of the history of the United States we tend to leave out when we talk about the Great Melting Pot.
All such great points. I love listening to you and learning about this stuff so much, and I love that I can, in a conversation, just ask just about anything, and there's a wealth of knowledge there. It always makes for such a great interview. I was just thinking that as you were talking about how good you are at this, of course. All right, so let me ask you about another thing that happened this time of year, and let me pull back the curtain. You mentioned this before I hit record. I'm not smart enough to have remembered that it happened, and I hadn't heard anybody really talking about it, but it was in March of 1938, March 12th to be specific, that the Nazis under Hitler invaded and annexed Austria. It's referred to in, is it Austrian, as the Anschluss?
That's the German word, Anschluss, and it means linking or connecting, literally. It's come to mean annexation when we use it. And it's a very, very important piece of World War II history that is completely relevant to this moment. And Pete, you and I have talked about history for long enough. It's not dates and battles and speeches that you memorize for the exam. It's understanding what the past has to do with the present, and it's certainly understanding how the past has shaped the present. What Vladimir Putin is doing in the Ukraine is a complete mirror, a complete playbook that Hitler used when he went into Austria. Hitler claimed that Austria, which kind of existed before Germany even existed. Germany was only created as a nation in the 19th century. There was an Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time that preceded it. But Hitler claimed that this country, Austria, was actually a piece of Germany, just as Vladimir Putin is claiming that Ukraine is culturally, linguistically, historically, psychologically, and everything else a piece of Russia. Completely untrue, but that's his basis for going into this country with this dreadful, brutal invasion. Pete, I hate war. I hate what war is and what it does. We are seeing the worst of it every day unfold now. But Vladimir Putin is parroting the words of Adolf Hitler when he went into Austria, claiming it was part of Germany and he was going to make it. The big difference in 1938, I'll point out right away, is that the Austrians welcomed the Nazis, and then they welcomed Hitler, who actually went to Vienna and gave a speech a few days later. It was the end of Austria as an independent nation at that time. Of course, they were later reconstituted after World War II. So this was step number one, though, in several steps in 1938 and then 1939. Hitler had done this. He did it very, very successfully without a shot being fired. And the European powers stood by and sat on their hands. The United States certainly had nothing to do with this, wanted nothing to do with it. They did not want to get involved with Europe's arguments and wars anymore. But Hitler had actually broken the terms of the Versailles Treaty. Again, you have to know your history. 1919, the Versailles Treaty ends World War I, but redraws all the maps of Europe and many of the maps around the world. You can almost point to any trouble spot in the world today and point back to 1919 in a way as being the source of it.
Huh.
So in 1919, Austria is created. Hitler says this is a phony creation. The Versailles Treaty, he throws it aside. He'd broken the treaty. The European powers, England and France in particular, really did nothing. A few months later, Hitler makes the same claim about a piece of Czechoslovakia, a country created after World War I, which had a German-speaking province called the Sudetenland. Hitler then told the European powers that he wanted the Sudetenland because it was really part of Germany, and they acquiesced. This is where the word appeasement comes from when we talk about history. Hitler was given a piece of Czechoslovakia because there were some German speakers there. Again, exactly what Vladimir Putin is claiming today about Ukraine, that there are Russian speakers there, and so it's really part of Russia. So Austria won, Sudetenland 2. Hitler goes too far in September of 1939 when he invades Poland. Poland was clearly not a piece of Germany, but this was part of Hitler's master plan. He had seen that when he went into these other countries, the European powers essentially rolled over. Unlike those, when he went into Poland, certain treaties then came into effect, alliances came into effect, and we can say that World War II, begins on September 1st, 1939, when Hitler invades Poland. But really, all of these steps leading up to it are where World War II began. So that's why when people are talking about World War III, I don't think we should take that lightly. We don't really want to envision all of the powers of the world coming into war as they did in 1914, and then again in 1939. These are dreadful, dreadful ideas to contemplate. But this is the history that you have to look back at. Hitler was a strong man who understood he could take things, and he was allowed to. And when he went too far, the results were catastrophic. I should also mention, by the way, going back to the Anschluss, that it marked the beginning of the end for Austrian Jews. There were about 200,000. They were either left right away, the ones who were lucky enough, or many of them were eventually consigned to the camps. Immediately after the Nazis moved in, Jewish businesses were shut down. Jews were actually forced to clean the streets on their hands and knees. It's the brutality of what Hitler did to the Jews in Austria was just going to be a hint of what was to come. And I went on too long for that answer.
Not at all. I'm sitting here hanging on your every word, as always. Let's talk about the history of I guess it would be called Soviet Union and Ukraine. I have interviewed Andrea Chalupa, who wrote a really amazing screenplay for a movie that covered the genocide. And I think most people probably don't know about that. And that history is so relevant. And what is it? Mr. Jones, the movie. I'm trying to look up the exact name of. Yeah, Mr. Jones. That's the name of the film. Anyway, give us, what do we need to know about Stalin and Ukraine and genocide? Because they all know, don't they? The people that live, certainly in Ukraine.
The people of Ukraine certainly know about Stalin. And I write about this, of course, in Strongman, my most recent book, which talks about the rise of these 5 dictators and the fall of democracy. So I talked about Hitler and what he did in Austria in there. But I also talk about Stalin and what he did in the Ukraine, because most Americans, I would say, have never heard that there was a Ukrainian Holocaust called the Holodomor, which happened before World War II began, which happened before Hitler was fully in power, before Hitler started to do these things. Joseph Stalin, who was the master of the Soviet Union, which included at that point Ukraine. Ukraine had been brought into the Soviet Union. We have to distinguish between Russia. Russia was the central republic in the Soviet republics, the Union of Soviet Republics, but it wasn't the only one. There were 12 republics. Ukraine was one of them. Joseph Stalin announced in the early 1930s a policy called collectivization. It's a nice sounding academic sort of term. What it meant was he was taking everyone's private property and turning it over to the state. This was, in essence, what communism set out to do, to take what was private property and turn it over to all the people. Of course, that's a fantasy. Collectivization, especially in Ukraine, meant that the wheat of Ukraine, which has traditionally been the breadbasket of Central Europe, enormous wheat fields, they starved the Ukrainian people. Mass starvation. Perhaps no one has real figures. 3 million is the number I have seen quoted by, and the great reference here. Perhaps you've spoken to Professor Timothy Snyder.
Yeah, I've interviewed him several times years ago and been meaning to try to get him back on.
Yeah, well, he's a busy guy these days, I'm sure. But one of his essential books, long before he wrote that nice little short book about tyranny, he wrote a book called Bloodlands, which describes the history of this part of Europe, the fighting and the genocide that went on long before World War II starts, both by Hitler and by Stalin. And so it's a very, very instructive book, goes far beyond the brief summary of what happens to Ukraine that's in my book. But these are important pieces of history to understand, that the Ukrainian people have no love for Russia and what the Soviet Union did to them. So when the Soviet Union disintegrates in 1991, Ukraine becomes an individual nation. It becomes a nation that wants to slowly move towards a free market democratic system, to move more towards Western Europe than towards Russia for historic and other economic reasons. And it's been a long, hard slog because of the history of that country. And this is where we were a few years ago when Vladimir Putin decided that he was going to start going after pieces of Ukraine as part of his ambition to recreate the Russian Empire, not as a communist country, but as a Vladimir Putin empire. Going back to more of a czarist idea of Russia dominating a Russian empire, dominating this part of Europe. So that is what brings us to this present state. And like 1938, when the Anschluss happened and the European powers sort of said, meh, go away, like when they gave the Germany a piece of Czechoslovakia, Putin has taken pieces of other countries. He's run over other countries. He's found willing allies in other countries as he attempts to reknit this Russian empire. And up until now, he's been pretty much permitted to do it, whether it was 20 years ago in Chechnya, where he bombed cities into rubble, or in Syria, where he bombed cities into rubble to protect his alliance with Assad. These were allowed to happen. It was allowed to happen when he took Crimea with some sanctions issued. Clearly, the sanctions were not enough. So that is the history that brings us to this moment.
So important. So important. Thank you very much. So well done, and so much more to it, obviously, than that. Let's talk more just about parallels with Putin as a strongman. You wrote the book. You wrote the history of several others, and it's crazy how historians have been, how I should say authoritarians have been so repetitive. And I'm not saying that they read each other's books or history and repeat them, or if this is kind of a natural order or disorder of things, that this is how they fall. But there are striking similarities with already and under, depending on what time frame that you want to look at in terms of Putin's aggression from Georgia to Crimea to Chechnya and, of course, now Ukraine. But they do seem strikingly similar to some of those that you did profile and even some that you couldn't fit in your book.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not going to say, I'm going to say that in the book, I talk about the strongman's playbook, and I'm not sure that, Vladimir Putin sat down and studied the strongman's playbook. He's certainly familiar enough with Hitler, which the Soviet Union had to battle, and Stalin, who was the master of the Soviet Union for a very long time. Vladimir Putin was a member of under the communist regime, the KGB, the secret police in the Soviet Union that were really born out of Stalin's own secret police. And it wouldn't, take too much history reading to understand what Stalin had accomplished in that country with purges of anyone who's disloyal. The great purges of the 1930s. You mentioned generals before. Stalin wouldn't have fired his generals. He would have put them on trial, a show trial, and shot them. Eventually, there were many who didn't even get the benefit of trial. That's what this enormous prison complex that we call the Gulag Archipelago was created to do, to set aside a really brutal place for any political prisoners, dissidents, writers like Alexander Solzhenitsyn, who eventually writes the history of the Gulag Archipelago, wins the Nobel Prize. Solzhenitsyn, this is a kind of telling story, had jokingly said to somebody something about Stalin being the big boss. And I forget if he wrote it in a letter or somebody overheard him saying this. And for that alone, he was sent to the prison camps. And that becomes the source of the novel he wrote called One Day in the Life of Ivan Denisovich. Very, very important short novel in 20th century literature. So this is what the strong man does. He comes into power, usually not always with a coup or a revolution. Mussolini and Hitler came into power like Putin did through democratic means. They were elected, but they quickly moved to destroy any vestige of constitutional democracy, either claiming an emergency or acquiring enough loyal followers to change legislation. So when Putin comes into power, he is eventually able to remove almost all of the constitutional and legislative restraints that were put on the leader of that country, including term limits. So he's essentially president for life at this time, filling the courts with loyal allies. And we've seen this done in other authoritarian regimes around the world since Putin, notably in Turkey, in Hungary, in the Philippines, in South America. This is a pretty standard retreat for these types of leaders. They don't need to read a playbook to understand it. They intuitively understand it, and they know what has worked in the past. So Putin has done all those things, absolutely. What else does it mean? It means removing the opposition, either through getting them out of the country or with outright murder and assassination. We know that people have been killed. There are mysterious journalists or politicians who have fallen out of windows. We know about the poisoning of Navalny. We know about the attempted poisonings of people in the United Kingdom. So all of these things to eliminate opposition are things these men understand intuitively. Right. Mussolini had a senator in the Italian Senate because there was still a legislature when he first came to power. 2 years after he comes into office, that man makes a speech decrying the fascists, decrying the election there as a fraud. He's then taken in a car and disappeared. His body is found a few weeks later. Some fascists aligned with Mussolini are eventually charged with the murder, but it's clear that Mussolini had ordered this to eliminate the opposition. Then you shut down the presses. You either close them down violently, or you make them so difficult, or you take them over and put in loyalists to run the media.
That's what I wanted to focus on next with you, which is we can look at the clampdowns of free press, speech, media control, internet blackouts from North Korea to China to obviously Russia. It's different types of censorship and the types of speech. But I kind of just wanted to start by, we hear this really hyperbolic, inflammatory rhetoric all the time in the American domestic political arena. And there's constant references to dictatorships and authoritarianisms. And I'm now thinking about Republicans talking about Joe Biden or talking about Barack Obama. I'm not so much thinking about Trump, but even with Trump, even with all the threats that he made and the chilling effects, he could not, as president, as badly as he wanted to, shut down the free press. I, for example, went on real-time Bill Maher and told him to go fuck himself, basically. Yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene called President Biden a senile old fossil. The point being, you can still say almost whatever you want in America. You can report whatever you want. Arguably, that's the problem, because Alex Jones is saying that lizard people are, Nancy Pelosi is a lizard or whatever. But so just the question is about the comparison in the rhetoric that we hear about American leaders versus today's authoritarian leaders, much less those from history.
It's a really good point. And I would say in the best, most optimistic, proud American sense that none of those other countries where those things happened had a Bill of Rights solidified into the operating system of the country the way the United States does. And of course, first among those Bill of Rights is the First Amendment protecting the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. Now, I am the first to complain about people like Thomas Jefferson and James Madison for all of their flaws and their contradictions. But this is the thing that we must be grateful for, that they really cemented this idea into the American system. And we've seen many, many challenges over 2+ centuries to the freedom of the press. But it has, till this time, been vibrant and protected by the courts. That's always continuously a battle. We, for instance, were seeing the suit by Sarah Palin against the New York Times over libel or defamation. The judge basically said he was going to throw it out, and then the jury threw it out. I don't think we've heard the end of that case. Very important Supreme Court case called Sullivan versus the New York Times really established the rules for libel and for defamation. And it set a very high bar for newspapers because the courts realized in their wisdom at the time that this was an important thing to protect. Same thing with the Pentagon Papers. Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger wanted to shut down the New York Times and Washington Post from publishing these secret papers that had been given to them by Daniel Ellsberg. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of the New York Times in that case, and the Pentagon Papers were published. So we do, for all our faults and our flaws and our shortcomings as a country, still have that freedom. But it is constantly under pressure. We know, for instance, that the financial pressures have really destroyed many of the local newspapers in this country, which have always been a very, very strong voice for local, active investigation of corruption on a local level. So that's been something that's disappeared, and it didn't take a strong man to do that. It took, the capitalist forces to do that, commercial forces. The other big difference today from even 10 years ago is the change that social media has brought about,
sure,
and the internet, because it becomes much more difficult in a country like the United States, where the state doesn't actually control who can be on the internet, to allow many voices, like, whether it's Alex Jones or Democracy Now! At the other end of the spectrum, to say what they choose. And this is the brilliance of the First Amendment. The First Amendment wasn't meant to protect the voices that we like. It was meant to protect the voices that we don't like. And for all their other flaws, the framers of the Constitution and the men who wrote the Bill of Rights understood that. It was a very, very significant idea. The British do not have the same protection, press protection, for instance, that the United States has through the First Amendment.
Right. Nor do the Canadians, right?
No, and then when you get to a situation where the state controls the media and controls the internet, as it does in the Soviet Union, as it does in Russia, and as it does in China, you're in a very, very different environment. So we hate the fact that there are people who can get up on a soapbox, a very big soapbox that has a big microphone, and say dreadful things about anything from Newtown to Dr. Fauci. And this is the price of having a completely free press. We hope that the marketplace eventually shuts some of those voices down, that people stop listening to them, people stop buying products from the companies that might sponsor them. That certainly does happen. But to have a situation where the government says that what Alex Jones said about Newtown, people then sued him, and they won that suit. The people of Newtown.
It's hard to do, but it happens all the time on a smaller scale where people, locally. It happened here where I live. And it's hard. It's hard case to prove, but nonetheless, sorry, go ahead.
So I think, we do have a loud, robust, occasionally very offensive range of media in this country, and for that we do have to thank the First Amendment. And I'd be very, very loath to see anybody put too many restraints on that.
I guess we can end it there unless there's anything else really relevant. I feel like I don't have another. I mean, I covered a lot of what I wanted to talk about with you. I could go deeper into any of these things. Is there anything else that you think should be mentioned in terms of the parallels between Putin's invasion and any other historical? I mean, we talked about the press. We talked about, obviously, the history of the region and the world. Anything else?
Yeah, well, I guess, the question I have is the question that millions of people have right now. Where is this going? History is very good about showing us where we've been and where we might go. It's not always a great predictor of where we are going, particularly with this situation. I hate war. I have read and studied and written about war for 30 years. Most of them are unjust, unnecessary, and cruel, and hurt the people who are most defenseless. And we're certainly seeing that play out in Ukraine today, in these heartbreaking pictures and the heartbreaking images we're seeing. And the image that President Zelensky actually showed the Congress yesterday, 2 days ago. It's quite extraordinary. So I don't know where this is going. I think that, I feel the frustration that many people might feel, that we should be doing more.
Sure.
But I also understand from the history the extraordinary risks, especially with somebody who is unpredictable, and has the power to essentially destroy humanity, to press that too far. So I'm sure there are many critics of what the Biden administration is doing. Are we doing too much? Or do we do enough? Are we going far enough? Should we set up a no-fly zone? It sounds very clean and simple. It's extraordinarily fraught with dangers and the potential for something much wider. It is much easier to get into a war than get out of it. And that's one of the chief lessons of the history as I understand it. So we can only hope that wiser heads, maybe in and around Mr. Putin himself, will say we have to find a way out of this, because they're clearly destroying the Russian people right now, as well as Ukrainian people economically. There's no comparison, of course, between missiles landing on a theater in downtown Kiev and not being able to buy your hamburgers at McDonald's. So I don't want to be glib and compare that. But the Russian people are going to feel this far more than Vladimir Putin and his coterie of friends will, until perhaps someone in the military says we've gone too far. They've already, according to the Defense Department estimates, lost more Russian soldiers than in 3 weeks than we lost in 20 years in Afghanistan.
It's hard to believe, but yeah.
So, my hope is that somehow cooler heads will prevail. We always believe, well, that's what the UN was built for, and we've seen that the UN is somewhat feckless in a situation like this, because it was built in that the five great powers at the time would really have the power to veto just about any decision the UN has made. So I don't see a lot of hope from there, but I am, I guess, hopeful because we have seen the opposite of Mr. Putin's intent, which was clearly to break up the Western alliance and not to see it get any stronger on his border. That has not only not happened, the opposite has happened. So this is an extraordinary moment in world history, and the last chapter is certainly still to be written.
Thank you so much for talking to me, as always. It's such a great pleasure to have or be in conversation with you or hear you anywhere. And people can bring the great professor into their organization, into their school, into their library. So check it out. I'll give all the plugs on the way out. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Pete. Stay well, be safe, and let's all hope for better days.
Indeed. All right, there he goes, Kenneth C. Davis on Twitter, don'tknowmuch.com. Please let him know that you appreciated him. Always such a great conversation. Today, no exception. I learned so much today. Never knew about the, what is it, initial? I don't know how to pronounce. I don't speak German. Anyway, great talk with him, and I love and appreciate him so much. Always enjoy it, and I know you do too. So many people love the conversations about history, and unfortunately, obviously, they're so relevant. All right, let's have a little fun and go deep with my friends Christian Finnegan and Ophira Eisenberg. These are two of the most respected comedians of my generation of stand-up comedians, and I'm very excited to be performing with them April 3rd. The Howland Center in Beacon, New York. We'll be adding dates and hope to see you at some of them sometime this year, hopefully. And you know both their bios, I hope. If you don't, please look them up. They're such accomplished, established comedians, and please support them on social media as well as other places. Ophira's got books. They both have comedy specials. And Christian just started a newsletter about music, which is fantastic. It's called New Music for Olds. That's linked in the show notes as well. I love it. Learning and discovering new music. I just love these guys. I love getting to talk with them every week. So here we go. Christian Finnegan, Ophira Eisenberg. We sat down on St. Patty's Day. And thank you very much to Garrett Sever for the jingle. Let's do it.
Christian Ophira Finnegan, no Christian Finnenberg. However you slice them up, you get a different word. If you say it fast enough, you clearly sound absurd. When you say it louder, it sounds like they're real words. Christian Ophira, Finnegan, oh Christian Finnegan. I don't think you're ready for what you haven't heard from Christian Ophira and Pete.
Yeah, here they are. I was just thinking, do you think like the cast members of another show, of any type of other show, do you think they listen to their intro before they tape every show, like Friends?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how they get psyched up.
Well, did you on Ask Me Another? Did you have a show?
No.
No.
I mean, they would sometimes do it if we were going to talk over the music bed, so it didn't sound weird.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well,
was that done live, or did they add that in post?
Add that in post. Yeah. I mean, right.
Post,
we did
guys,
play it
that's
live,
post production for you.
Right. When we did it live,
out there.
I guess we would play it in the house because it was the beginning, but that wasn't always the one that was used.
Nobody ever says, they always say add it in post, but nobody ever says, we'll do it in pre, I feel. I feel like that should be a thing, but that's not a thing.
We'll go back in time. We'll do it in pre.
Yeah, exactly. What we did in pre, we're going to use in post.
Yeah. I don't know.
You guys are blowing my mind.
Well,
yeah, I know.
I'm very happy to see you both. Thank you very much for joining. How was your weeks? We ended on a big laugh last week, and ever since I've been wanting to talk to you guys, and I wonder how your week. Anything exciting? Any near death experiences, Ophira?
No, I found out I have something called smiling depression.
Oh, great! That's great. Well, we have an hour to talk about it.
Wait, what did you say? I'm sorry. I was telling my wife to stop texting me because I'm on Pete Dominic's podcast.
How dare she? You didn't hear?
I read an article. It was a clickbait that I was baited into about something called smiling depression. And
is that like a strategy, or is that a something that exists that they're calling attention to? Yeah,
right now it's like there's a certain category. Basically, this is how if I were to just summarize, it's like, hey, guess what, everybody? Everybody but Pete Dominic is depressed.
Yeah, I think smiling depression. I think that's called being a comedian.
I know some of you display depression very obviously. And the rest of you that are just walking around with a smile, able to put clothes on your body, buy some food, and kind of keep it together, like hit the gym every once in a while, but are still totally sad and find no meaning in life. Mm-hmm. You are depressed as well.
Yeah, well, I also think of it as like everybody's depressed, but some people are narcissists and some people aren't. Some people must make you constantly aware of their depression, and other people understand that they are but a speck in a big hole, and that maybe the world doesn't need to know how depressed you are on an hour-to-hour basis. Well,
you know what I say? I say I'm better at depression than most people.
Yeah, you're a pro. You're one of these amateurs. Appropriate that we're doing this on like with people drinking on St. Patrick's Day.
Oh,
do you know what I mean? It's
exactly.
Like, yeah, come on, amateurs.
Well, why are you a pro, and what does that mean? How do you know that you've gone pro?
She's drafted. She has an agent.
The moment that someone was like, guess what? Soon you'll be a veteran, but from right now, you're just pro. You've just been doing it a lot of years. You've mastered it.
I think it was when you got your endorsement deal with Prozac.
Yeah, I know. I said my Zoloft one ran out. And I was looking around.
Do you laugh at young rookies? Do you laugh at young rookies who haven't built resilience?
Oh,
hey, kiddo.
Your first time being sad?
Well, you tweeted something. You tweeted something this week that was kind of heartbreaking and made me feel bad for you. And it was just like, it was also funny because it wasn't me, which is why I think you tweeted it. Because you tend to be like, hey, listen, this might not be as funny for me as it is going to be for you to read it. But you guys, everybody had spring break in New York City from school, and your kids' friends, they all went to the islands, the Caribbean, and then you worked really hard to get your kid into some sports program.
Yes.
And
yeah. And you know how New York goes? There was a waiting list. We had to get on a waiting list because it was already sold out. And it's a privilege to pay $600 for a week of a 22-year-old, like idly maybe looking at your child play soccer.
You kick it with your foot.
But the kicker was that that he really wanted to do it. You got him into it, and like on day 2, he's like, "I'm good. This sucks."
He hates it. He hates it.
You know, I think of it as him saving you money. Think if he come to that conclusion like 10 years from now.
I think
he hates it. He hates the people. He hated the coach.
It's a thing for sure that I think most parents probably deal with, and that either you force your kid to do a thing, a program, or more likely, it's worse, obviously, they want to do it and then they hate it. And I don't know if you guys ever had that experience yourself. Did you ever like really want to do a thing, beg your parents to do it, and then as soon as you did it, you're like, oh, I don't like it here. Or it could be a thing you got that you begged to have. You know, my daughter does it daily with food. Oh, I want that. I got to get that salad. She did it today. Got a salad. It's like $15, 2 bites.
Oh, 2 bites?
In the fridge for somebody else. Really?
That would drive me crazy.
It burnt me out pretty good. Yeah, so I made her walk home.
I mean, I know I've talked about my ballet lessons as a child because it was really the only ones I had, but I hated ballet. I was bad at it. And so I begged for it because I was like, I was that little girl who was twirling around and wanted tutus and all the rest of that stuff. And then here we go. All right, huge commitment ballet lessons. And I hated it. And I was terrible at it. Right. It was so hard.
Yeah, I did sports for years longer than I enjoyed doing them. I don't know that I ever enjoyed them, but I just did them because that's what kids in my town did. Do you know what I mean? You did soccer in the fall and you did baseball or whatever in the spring. Like soccer, I guess I played a little longer. I played 2 years of football, which has permanently scarred me.
Why?
Well, because I was big. I was bigger than the other kids. And so, but I was a total wuss. And so I was just such a target for any kid with the Napoleon complex. I was such a rite of passage for so many Pete Dominics out there. Because I would cry. I would cry if you bullied me hard enough. And once there's blood in the water, like people just understood that. And every once in a while, I would go into one of those Ralphie from A Christmas Story psycho rages, and I would play really well because I'd be like the defensive end or defensive tackle or something. And I would be like tears streaming down my face as I pummeled the quarterback or something like that. But that was like 1 out of every 100 plays. And the rest of it, I was just like, oh, I don't like to touch people.
I never heard that story. Wait, how old were you? Good. Because didn't you go to like
32?
It was your last year of high school? That was your last year of high school?
Yeah. It was probably, like 6th grade, 5th, 6th grade, I think. Something like that. And, my dad, God bless him, and I say that because I'm pretty sure he's listening. I think he just kind of like, both my parents just kind of like put us in sports because that's just what people did in the town. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And it took my dad, I think, like a couple years of me being like, I'm an arty kid, for him to fully internalize that and to sort of get on board with that like who his son was and who his son wasn't.
Right.
I think.
Yeah.
And what was out there for you, right?
Yes.
I think the best thing you can do as a parent
curtain calls. That's what was out there for me.
Curtain calls. How is that not the name of your album? Let me tie in 2 events because St. Patrick's Day yesterday, and I have emotional scars because the closest I've gotten to a war zone, and this is how I know the people of Ukraine feel right now, was working in Midtown Manhattan and walking out of Sirius XM at Rockefeller Center, which is right on 6th Avenue where the parade is, at about 1 o'clock, which is when most of these guys are already drunk and fighting and turning over food carts. And I would walk into a combat zone. Like I'd walk out of the lobby and it was just insanity out there. And I think I started like staying home and doing the show from home because St. Patrick's Day in Manhattan is the same as Ukraine or any war zone.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. All the Irish. I'm
just going to sit back Ukraine and let you guys dig this hole.
All right.
ridiculous. Where is it that is Chicago that they died or they used to die?
They're back. They weren't doing it for a couple of years and then they're back to it. Thank God.
Yeah.
But vegetable dye now. I was explaining to my son, I was like, oh yeah, St. Patrick's Day. And he was like, what do we do for St. Patrick's Day? And I said, nothing. Yeah. And I said, here's what we used to do growing up. We would drive over to McDonald's, which by the way, he has never been to, only because if you live in New York, it's like, it's not a thing like that, right. So he's never been to McDonald's. And I go, so we drive to McDonald's and we buy a Shamrock Shake, which was like a green milkshake. And I was like, and thinking back, they tasted terrible.
I don't know, man. I still use a Shamrock Shake, and I immediately got delicious waves going through my brain
of mint corn, high fructose corn syrup.
No, I'm pretty sure you're wrong. I'm pretty sure they had that thing well tested out, and as everything else that fast food joints make, they knew what we liked, and we sure liked it, and they teased us with it for like just a couple days, a week around the. Yeah, and then they'd yank it out of there. And I'm like, I didn't get my thing. I didn't get my Shamrock Shake. I will say now, I've seen the ads for them. They've definitely upgraded. They have like cookies inside of them now. I mean, it's just maybe that's not McDonald's though. Maybe that was
corned beef.
Really there's a McRib shoved in there. They shove a McRib in there.
I don't. Yes, somebody was like, if we put something with an MC ahead of it, it'll make it that much more Irish. It's Scottish, Bruce. It doesn't matter. They won't know.
Good. Have you guys seen The Founder? That movie, The Founder?
Yes, I love that movie.
It's great. It's Michael super Keaton. Interesting. Yeah, about Ray Kroc and the of birth of McDonald's. It's so good. It's the kind of movie that I was like, I assumed I would watch 5 minutes of it and then turn it off, and I found it like really kind of fascinating.
Oh, I love those movies, the origins of a company, I guess you would call that.
And it's just such an American in good ways and bad ways. Like that dude was such a prototypical. Like what makes an American different than a Norwegian or a Spaniard or something? It's if you're surfing channels or looking for something to stream, it's not a bad way to spend 90 minutes.
Great movie.
A Spaniard?
I just meant like some other person from another country.
Okay. Got it. It's like that Napoleon thing. It was like a Napoleon, a Spaniard. What is it? So what is it?
It's like a biopic of the guy who.
No. What is the Americanness that makes that
the Americanness? The sort of the idea of like, I have a dream and I'm going to make it happen, and I'm going to be filled with positivity and forward energy, and no one's going to tell me no. And then once I realize my dream, I'm going to make sure that nobody else can realize their dreams. So you know what I mean? So it's like positive and negative.
That's where the American part comes in. It's pulling the ladder up behind you.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, but still with this idea of like, I worked hard for this, which is true. Right. But I'm going to make sure that no one else can also achieve what I achieve.
I feel like it's quintessentially American because, and maybe the Canadian here, or somebody else listening will push back, but I feel like the narrative is similar in America, where the main character, the protagonist, is a salesman. He's he's selling something. And Ray Kroc started with milkshake makers and ended with real estate and McDonald's. But you think about Death of a Salesman, Arthur Miller's great American play. He was a salesman. And there's all this, and what you just said about America, if you go to America and you want to sell an idea, an item, whatever, this is the place to do it. And then you'll slowly die.
Right.
It really is dying, there's that attitude that people around the world used to admire about Americans, that sort of can-do spirit and that sort of lack of cynicism, which has
enthusiasm.
Curdled. Yeah.
That kind of
it's
desire.
Curdled over the last 50 years, but we still have that in our DNA somewhere.
It's so funny. Go ahead.
I would just add that kind of desire for as much stuff as you can until you run out of space.
Yeah.
That's a very.
But as you brought up the thing that I tweeted about, like I'm seeing on how do I know all my kids' friends are in the Caribbean right now? It is because their parents are Instagramming, and I was having this moment where I was like, looking. Obviously, these people are in my feed, and I was like, why? What is the point of going on a vacation and literally you're taking these photos? There's no funny captions. There's not funny captions. They're not there for marketing purposes. you're literally just posting snapshots. Why?
Yeah.
I was like, I literally said to my husband, if it's not about branding, why are you putting it on Instagram? And then
it's a way to tell people how successful you are.
Right, and I guess that is
and it's a way to make your life real. Do you know what I mean? That it's like, it's not real unless it's experienced by other people. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of tree falling in the woods type thing. Yeah. I think. I mean,
it's the worst thing. Outside of all of the horrible things about social media, it's the worst thing. Meaning FOMO, fear of missing out. And for my daughters now with Snapchat, I don't know if you guys use that, but they can see where all of their friends are. You look on the map, you can see. So you can see if everybody's at a party that you weren't invited to, or if everybody's in Florida during spring break and you aren't because your parents work in a shed. But it doesn't matter. Like they know where they're.
What would their jobs in the shed be when you? Oh, I see. Your job. Oh, I see. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were making a Pete Dominic joke. I thought you were just saying like that. Their parents
I was talking about
shed.
like me and blacksmiths.
Right.
Yep.
Other people who have shed workplaces.
Shedsman.
Can you imagine knowing where everybody is that you aren't? It sucks. It's really brutal.
One of the most, I had this memory of when I first moved to New York, being a big town versus like, not that I didn't live in big towns in Canada, but somehow even in Toronto, it just felt like maybe because it was so neighborhood based, like I just always would run into people or something. Definitely Calgary growing up felt very small to me. But I remember being in New York and walking down the street, and I did not have a smartphone, and because they were not around, and just thinking, it's so cool right now that nobody knows where I am. I like the anonymity was like so intoxicating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, which is mostly because you were going to commit a random murder.
Yeah.
Well, there was that.
Yeah. A thrill kill.
But instead I found stand-up comedy. What a success story.
Which is you thrill kill on stage, baby.
That's right. Lady killer.
I don't know why. It got wild right there for a minute, and I felt unsafe. Felt very unsafe. So, what do you got? What else do we think about what is happening in the world right now? Are we paying attention to the war? Are we?
That was the podcast host version of "So what else is going on?"
What else is? I like that. I actually like that everyone has unearthed through social media. I will say this is obviously news, but then people did just blow this up through social media, what the price of oil barrels are actually, and how we are being completely just gouged by the companies with these ridiculous gas prices. Obviously, that is something people feel so personally. So then they are committed to investigating it. And I find that pretty interesting. All of a sudden, the gas stations near me responded by dropping 4 cents.
Yeah. It's also like, I've never understood like why the Sunoco is $4.15 and the BP is $4.35. Like
that has to do with the snack shops and who has more to offer. Like if you don't have as many snacks, you can't charge as much to get people over there. It's
like you may have the peanut M&Ms, but do you have the share size?
Right.
Yeah. Or any other number of an energy drink selection, beef jerky, fake pot items that I almost buy every time.
What?
Like,
those weird CBD sort of. They're like legal pot items.
No, I've never bought them because I know it's a scam. I'm pretty sure it is, but like one of them says THC on it. And I was like, well, maybe Dad should try it out. I'm Dad. And then I don't get it though, because I'm always like,
I was like when you go to like one of those off the highway truck stops, and in the bathroom they'll have one of those vending machines, and they'll have condoms in it, but then they'll also have, I haven't seen it in years, but they'll have something called horny goat weed.
Oh yes, yeah.
This is a window into a world I've never experienced.
I can tell you right now that does not work. Yeah,
it makes you want to fuck goats, and I think
it's an herbal Viagra, like to get, isn't it? Or
yes. I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah. I think, and I guess it's for dudes who are getting truck stop prostitutes or whatever. I assume that's why they're sold at these highway rest stops. But I've always wondered, like, I mean, I understand if the idea of you're a trucker and you just need a little personal touch, and so you go to the truck stop prostitute. But I can't understand the idea of like, I'm not even horny, but I need to get horny.
Yeah, I never got that
I can
either.
have sex with a truck stop prostitute. Is the experience that exciting?
truck stop prostitute. You know, when I learned at SiriusXM, all the truckers were calling the really pejorative term that would call truck stop prostitutes, which was lot lizards.
Yes.
Yeah, which is really, yeah. But I remember.
Wait a second, and the men were just called truckers? Let's just be clear.
Yeah, the men are working.
Got it. Yeah. Right, because that's how the money exchange goes. The men
I mean, I'm sure that the lot lizards had a name for the truckers that they shared amongst themselves. They just don't have to call it Pete's Sirius XM show.
They would call them limp dick is what they'd call them.
Apparently.
Need some horny goat weed.
Well, I went in, I asked a guy, like a young guy was working me on the register once, and I was just messing around. I was like, what is this horny goat weed stuff? And he's like, it gets your dick hard. And I was like, well, I don't have any problem with that. And then he looks at me, and there's like a long beat, and he goes, yeah, but it gets you rock hard. And I was like, I don't have anything to say. I don't have anything to say.
Like, I'll just take the Slurpee, Kurt, and I'll be on my way.
You can make a table with this. You can drill holes.
Exactly. What are you trying to do? You can slap those nails that you need to make a shelf.
How hard do you need your penis?
You can't even call them lot ladies. You had to go with lizards.
I was also told that they would, after sex in the truck, they told me that the poor woman would go wash themselves in a puddle.
Oh, no.
Okay, well, come on now.
And I'm telling you this now because it was one of those moments when I was at SiriusXM for like a year, and I was like thinking about, is this where I want to be, like having this conversation, which is why I headed into, a different kind of content maybe, but it was that kind of, I was having those conversations with guys every day, just being horrible truckers listening to the Comedy Channel. And I was like, I don't know. I think I might grow out of this. This seems weird.
I don't really want to have anyone fact check on this, but I feel like that is just like a degrade. Like there's degradation happening of these women anyways. And then there's like a degradation fantasy that it continues into where now they're washing themselves in puddles. I mean, like, come on.
I'm sure a lot lizard at a certain point has washed herself in a puddle, but I don't know that that's like in the lot lizard handbook. I don't know if that's
because who I would say washes themselves in puddles? Truckers. That's who I say washes themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's what I'm putting it back on you, truckers. Well, not all of you. The ones like that are seriously considering the horny goat weed.
You know who you are, Earl.
Rod is a trucker. He's listening. So is Drew. So
I was considering being a trucker of some sort for a while, by the way.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Because of the money.
I was considering being a lot lizard.
It's not too late. Not too late. Yep. You guys could have a meet cute.
I met at a Uber driver. I was actually someone who was driving Uber that we were talking was a woman, and she was telling me how she had almost passed this driving course to be able to drive a certain kind of rig. It was all so specific, and I didn't get it all in.
CDL, the commercial driver's license. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was like the largest one because, of course, the largest ones are carrying.
Yeah, CDL 1A. I had a scholarship for lacrosse at the National Tractor Trailer School. Go ahead.
Wait, what are they carrying?
Gas and oil.
Oh, okay.
So it's like more intense
right.
vehicle. And she was just telling me that, she was going to make basically a couple $1 million.
But she would most likely die in a ball of fire.
Most likely. I mean,
$1 million?
Like 9 out of 10?
On the upside, this pays really well. On the downside, there is a roughly 90% chance
9 out of 10 chance.
In a ball of fire.
Wait.
Yeah, you might still be like, I'll take it.
Was this a recent fantasy / opportunity of yours?
It was actually right before the pandemic.
Oh my God,
oh my gosh, wow, you really, man. I was saying to somebody recently that I'm really happy that my midlife crisis dovetailed with the pandemic.
Yeah.
That it was very efficient.
Yeah.
That
because you could be like, what am I going to do? Oh, yeah, nobody's doing anything.
Yeah. And just as like, if I'm going to be miserable and existential, at least like I can get them both done at once. Like I would hate to have come out of my midlife crisis and then immediately had the pandemic.
I think it's good that you had your heart surgery during the pandemic when nothing was going on.
Well, I had my heart surgery in the 3 months when everybody was happy and everybody thought the world was coming back to life, like right before Delta.
Remember that?
Yeah. We were so young.
How do we feel about COVID and how do we feel about spring? I think I am so every year affected positively this time of year. I love winter,
absolutely.
But at the end of the winter, I do get a little bit of the blues. But times change, the clocks. But most importantly, living here with my little plot of under an acre, I love it.
No more daylight savings, potentially. That's interesting.
Maybe the Senate passed it, but the House and the president, I bet you there's literally going to be special interests arguing for and against because of the benefits that they money they make.
People have been saying, I've seen people say that they tried this in the 70s and everybody hated it and they went back to it.
Because in the winter, because in the winter mornings are dark.
Yeah,
but as someone who gets up at 9, I don't give a fuck.
Right. There's pros and cons, and it's all based on your lifestyle, it would seem.
Yeah.
And
so what will I say about so anyways, so for some reason today, I think whatever vitamin D, winter blahs, I think yesterday it was warm and sunny and I found myself just a little spring in my step. I was like, I was looking if my daffodils are coming out yet at all. And then today I found myself doom scrolling and saw a couple headlines that read, I love, how they are written always. I always appreciate the writing. New coronavirus variants coming soon. I enjoyed that. Just coming soon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Trailer just dropped.
Yeah. The spike in Europe. When will that hit America and why?
But the question about it right now, I feel like.
What does that mean for Utah?
Is even if you weren't worried at all about getting ill or worried about anybody else getting ill, you might be worried about how it's going to affect your business and your work. And I think I think we need to try to realize that things have changed, except for, I'm not sure about that latter one, certainly for live performance. People are going to act, quote, normal and do a lot of normal stuff and be less worried about the new variants unless they really are killing people who have been vaccinated or something like that. But are they going to gather the way that we normally do? And I think that's probably where.
No, the answer is no. Yeah. But the answer, this again, I think I've mentioned this before. It's like, how hard is it to get people out of their houses? So basically, if you want to date someone, you're getting out of your house. But anyone else who either doesn't want to date, I honestly think could be as simple as, you need to date someone, you're out of the house at night. Everybody else is like, I'm good.
Well, that's what I was saying. I think I said this on the podcast in the past, that I really feel like, and I'm speaking specifically about New York, what's going to save New York? It's going to be about 5 years. It's going to be about that first crop of horny post-college kids who moved here who didn't live through this pandemic. Do you know what I mean?
That's interesting.
The people who are in junior high or high school right now, when they graduate college and they want that city experience and they're going out to clubs and bars and shows who don't have that sort of, PTSD, it's going to take that.
You're talking about my girls.
Pretty much.
Yeah, your girls are going to save the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
They know. We've talked about it. Yeah.
And how do they feel about the responsibility?
A lot of pressure. They're like, Dad,
great responsibility, whatever, great power.
A lot of pressure you're putting on us. I brought Julia, 14, into New York City for the first time with a friend where they were alone. And of the 3 New Yorkers that I told, they all thought I was a terrible father. And I said to them, what are you worried about? And like, crime has gone way up. I'm like, I know crime has gone up in every city, but like, are there a lot of 14-year-old girls getting attacked or anything? And it's like, she's like, oh yeah, this woman. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think there's like public attacks happening. You just focus on the ones that happen. But and of course they had a great time. They got lost and nervous because they were lost, and great. It was great. It was great.
It's so stupid. First of all, yes, even if crime were to go up 10 times as much, it still wouldn't be anywhere where it was in the 70s and 80s.
Important point.
And people were going to New York then. You know what I mean? It's
but to be fair, there's the difference. Crime is never going to get whatever. What do I know? But I'm just going to, there's my interpretation. Crime is never going to be like that. Because guess what? Rents are too high. Like in the 70s, you also had people who were able to afford living there. Now it's like the only people that are living there are gazillionaires.
It's
and
basically,
then you have and the violence is all coming from people who are not being served by any like mental health facilities. Like it's not like bad people. It's the saddest. It is the saddest.
Which is not to say that mentally ill people are violent, because most mentally ill people are more likely to be violent to themselves.
I'm pretty sure that's exactly what Ophira was saying. No, I mean,
mentally
the
ill
fact
people.
is, like, it's not like you're unleashing your kids on the West Side Highway at 3 a.m. You know what I mean?
Which would be funny.
That would, that's Adventures in Babysitting.
I'd watch that.
Right there.
I'd watch that. Yeah.
but I mean, it's kids go into the city. When I was a kid, like, we'd take the train and go into Boston. I mean, that's just what kids do.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, and back then we didn't have phones. I didn't have any way of letting my parents know that every hour that things were okay.
Dude, she called me 3 times because she got on the wrong subway with the wrong direction. She was panicking. You know what I was doing? Laughing. Never was I worried. I said to her, ask someone, anyone, probably a woman.
Yeah.
And
I went to a concert, a live performance concert at Barclays Stadium this week. Tame Impala, which is a psychedelic band from Australia.
I love them, and I'm so bummed that you said the name before I could jokingly jump in and say the Wiggles, which was also from Australia. But I was going to but how were they? Was it good?
Still worth it.
It was really good. The light show was incredible. I mean, clearly they loved, they probably listened to a lot of Pink Floyd. Growing up, there was definitely some of that. But my husband and I, we were the oldest people there. But like, we couldn't even decide. We were like, are we 20 years older than everybody or 30 years older than everybody? We felt so old.
Good for you.
And I felt like everyone was looking at us going like, I see the parents, but I don't see their kids.
They're cool. They're cool parents. They're letting their kids sit in another section, so they have a feeling of autonomy.
Luckily, we were sitting in what I called the nerd row, because everyone in our row was like, no, we're cool with sitting, but they were still pretty. I was like, I love our row. Our row is like, I just want to experience it like this, And I was looking around and just thinking of going to concerts when I was, I think my first concert I went to alone with my friends. I was 16. And our parents dropped us off, and everyone was smoking. Like, everyone was smoking. No one's smoking at Barclays. They have that. I mean, and maybe they are, but that stuff is just so different now.
Yeah.
And then like my mom would pick us up, and we'd be basically high. Maybe we were smoking. Maybe we were just high because we were surrounded by
contact.
Tons of weed. No one even thought twice about it. It's just.
Well, the phones make you so much more worried about your kid. Right before we went on, I checked to make sure Ava made it. She's driving, to her dance class. Okay, just wanted to make. And it's like, why am I doing this? It's only it's not helping. By the way, I should mention, that was when we went to the city. It was 2 weeks ago, and we actually haven't seen her. She's gone.
Yeah, man, don't worry. I mean, people are so uptight. I mean, just like
that's what I keep telling my wife.
Yeah, just go on Snapchat.
I can't find. She's in a drug den in Lower Manhattan.
But look, it's with all of her friends. Look, it's with all of her friends.
She's hanging out. It's fine. She's learning her way. She's learning the ropes. It's ridiculous that I don't know. I mean, I've talked about this a million times on the show, that the helicopter parent versus the free range parent, but you're only making your kid more scared for the rest of their life versus, I don't know, building confidence. You got lost in Manhattan, but you found your way, didn't you? And how does that make you feel, like that you overcame that? Like, scared, I never want to go back on the subway again. Well, okay. That backfired.
Right. I love that. That is so adorable.
My dad loves telling the story of the time that I got lost in Provincetown. When I was a kid, like, my whole family went to Provincetown in Cape Cod, which, for people who don't know, is like the gay mecca of New England. And I don't remember this part, but I guess there was some bar called Boys Club, and I was like, Dad, let's go in. And he's like, no, I don't think
I'm a boy. I love clubs.
It's a club for kids like me. But yeah, I do remember getting lost in Provincetown and walking around for hours. And at the time, I mean, it's summer in Massachusetts, but I remember I didn't know, you don't really know what gay people are gay, lesbian. You don't really know what that means. All I knew is that it was a bunch of people who all dressed the exact same. They all were wearing pastel colored tank tops, both the men and the women. And I was like, why does everyone here look exactly the same?
We had a similar experience in Provincetown when we were little. We would always go to Cape Cod, and we'd never stay there because it was too expensive. We would camp in Plymouth, but nonetheless, we were in Provincetown. We saw a bunch of. I remember seeing, I think, 2 women holding hands, and I asked about it, and my dad was like, "Look at that cloud," and he like distracted from it. When we brought the girls to Provincetown, so much time has passed and so much has changed. I took a picture of Julia, 10 or 11 years old, eating a chocolate dick and sent it to my dad. Like a chocolatier, they had like, dicks on sticks and stuff. And I all right,
now I'm starting to maybe be on the other side of this.
I don't know if that's the free range parenting we're talking about.
She didn't know it was a dick. I just wanted the picture. Anyway,
yeah, perfect. Well, have you showed? Is that going to be in her reel for graduation?
No, it's in her college application portfolio.
Great.
Special skills.
Oh my goodness.
I'm a good parent. Listen, introduce them to everything, and then they'll sort it out. That's what I say.
I guess so. It's funny because you were saying that all these people chime back when I was like, oh my God, all this stuff, and then my kid hated camp. And what am I going to do? And of course, I'm not going to pull them out because I spent the money. Like, that's how it all works to me. I mean, I guess it was something really terrible. Like,
you will enjoy this.
But it's just like the money you spent. You got to do it.
Yeah.
And someone wrote back, they're like, here's the rule of thumb with kids in camp. Unless they're puking all day, they stay.
Okay.
Thank you. So
I went to camp, and when I was 13 and I was still afraid to sleep over at my friends' houses at 13-year-old boy, I did not like being away from my parents. And I was at lacrosse camp, and my heroes were college lacrosse players when I was young, like my athletic heroes, because it was such a big sport where I grew up.
I believe that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I can think
that was patronizing. But then I was...
No, it was an insult. It was a straight up insult.
Okay, fair enough. I was homesick on day 2, and I called my parents on the payphone in the hallway of the dorm at Syracuse University, and I was crying. And around the corner walks my hero.
Oh, my God.
You all right, little buddy? And I was like, oh, my God, Gary Gate.
Chad Chesterton? I don't know. It sounds like a lacrosse guy's name. I don't know.
He like tousled my hair. He's like, everything's going to be okay. I'm like, my hero caught me crying. That'd be like David Hasselhoff walking up to you, Christian, when you were.
Yes.
For me, it'd be Lanny McDonald.
Who's this?
Who is that?
Hockey player from the Calgary Flames.
Oh, all right.
Oh.
And whatever. He had a big red mustache, sort of. Yeah.
I saw
icon.
I saw Goose Gossage in the airport about 7 years ago, and you ever done this to a famous person? Like, say hello to them by accident. Like, I didn't even mean it. I go, Goose. Oh, yeah. I go, Goose, and he looks at me and he's like, I'm like, I don't, sorry.
They're used to it.
Just you end up like, you're so excited, you just yell out their names, and you're like, what did I do?
Well, I had that for years, like about 3 years, where people would just yell out, I had sex with Katie too, or you stabbed my dad from the Chappelle Show sketch, like at least twice a day.
Oh, like that's crazy.
I couldn't go more than 2 hours if I was in public without somebody just yelling that. I had sex with Katie too.
Did you get any preferential treatment anywhere? Was anyone like, let me pay for your dinner?
I probably have at some point. I had a lot of, I would be very, very appreciated in certain neighborhoods. Like the same neighborhoods that ironically didn't appreciate me at all before that.
Oh, because of
like when I remember I went up to a party. It was actually right when Are We There Yet was on too. And, I went up to a party in Hamilton Heights, like above Harlem, and I was just like the fucking belle of the ball.
Sure.
Like kids, parents, I felt like the ring bearer
because
at a
those
wedding.
shows,
very exciting.
Both those shows have huge black audiences.
Yes, and I was living high on the hog.
Did black people hate your work on Best Week Ever and love your work on Chappelle Show? And Are We There Yet? Is that what happened?
I don't think that there's a massive black audience for Best Week Ever. I mean, there may have been, maybe not the same. Certainly not the same. I don't know. I could be mistaken about that. I don't
think bring that show back.
Best week ever because Twitter is best week ever.
Because everyone just does it.
You couldn't get a joke. I mean, even then, like the idea of waiting till Friday for somebody to tell you a joke about some pop culture thing.
About a news item, I know, right?
I mean, even by the time like Colbert and Jimmy Fallon is like, the jokes are already done by the time they even hit the air.
It's so true.
All right.
It's so true.
Do you guys, last question, do you guys have a crush on the president of Ukraine? He's done the most amazing. No one thought this could happen. This guy, this actor and comedian, knows every audience he is speaking to. He spoke to the Canadian Parliament different than the German Parliament. He spoke to the American Congress different than the last audience. He makes videos that are understatedly slick, and he has vocal inflections that he changes. He speaks 3 different languages at least. And he's kind of hot, and he's like winning with all of this charm and flair and technology. And I think it's an amazing surprise, and I'm inspired by it, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
It gives me hope for me.
I know. I've been trying a joke on stage for the past few days, which is a weird thing to make a joke about, but just that, like that 5 years ago he was an actor, and not to take anything away from him, but I know a lot of actors and none of them should be president. But it really, I'm worried that it's going to give other actors more confidence to try to be big deals.
All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, he's already.
I know, but it's going to just back then. It's like, oh, maybe that is, I think clearly.
It's so funny you say.
We're not going to talk about my McConaughey impression at all. We're not even going to talk about it.
That was pretty good.
Oh, that was McConaughey? I'm sorry. I thought that was Judi Dench.
It's true. If Dame Judi Dench ran for president of America, I would vote for her.
That's a good, yeah.
I'm just going to
All right. All right.
I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be her catchphrase, but might be. I don't know.
Someone a long time ago gave me a note when it came to stand-up, and I feel like at least this is being dispelled right now, which was like, no, you don't change your act depending on your audience. You are who you are, and you make them love you. But I like the fact that what you just said, this thing where it's like a different thing was said for these people to ingratiate them and charm them. Different thing was like kind of researched and smart and strategic, which I think that is how a good
you certainly have to know the room you're playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think you don't necessarily have to change. And again, not to equate what we do with what he's doing, but it's like,
especially right now,
you're not going to change your entire act, but you're definitely going to present it differently for a college crowd than you would some sort of, Payne Weber corporate gig. I mean, you're going to frame it slightly differently. You're going to have a different attitude.
By the way, Payne Weber, we would love to be hired.
Yep, we're available.
Yeah, I am.
Are they still operating?
I'm free.
Are they still operating in Russia? Did you see the list of companies that are still like holding on? It's like Papa John's, Blimpie Subs, the Coke industry has like a glass making. I don't know what else are, but it's a weird thing to be the last company operating.
And strangely, Build-A-Bear.
That's right.
I don't know.
Well,
I have no idea.
There's only one bear you can build, though. There's only one choice.
That's true. The Russian bear, the national bear,
the Putin bear.
In Russia, the bear builds you.
All right, guys. Well, this was a long one. I just didn't want it to end. I love talking to you both, and I had a lot of laughs. So thank you. Anything else? I'll plug things. I'll plug everything on the way out.
Yeah, coming up fun shows.
April 2nd, we're doing our show. Can't forget that. We're doing our show at the Allen Center.
Yep.
Three of us in person together for the only third time?
You know what?
Second time.
Here's the thing I want to tell you right now that it's one of those weird things that I feel a little embarrassed about, but I don't think I've ever been to Beacon, New York, which is where this is. And Beacon, New York is apparently this absolutely beautiful, wonderful, very progressive town on the Hudson River and New York State, north of the city.
It's beautiful. It's for people who are New Yorkers, but just couldn't deal with New York anymore.
Yeah.
But and they still do art and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super.
Is it mostly the whites?
Certainly the section where the Howland Center is. Yeah. I don't know about the town in general, but
well, I'm very excited to check it out for the first time. So
I don't know. We might be able to find a Spaniard.
Yes. Folks, that's a callback. In case you just turned the show on.
I can't let it go. Spaniard is a beautiful word. It's just
although they call it the Holland Center.
Is that right?
Nice.
Spanish. That's Spanish.
They must be Catalans.
That was very good. A little Barcelona humor.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Thank you very much. And I will talk to you same time next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey now. Yeah. Christian Finnegan, Ophira, Eisenberg. Loving it. Another great conversation. I hope you liked it as much as I liked having it. And I appreciate you. Thank you for supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening this week. Let me know what I can do better, differently. Always call me out with disagreements, or if I misspeak, let me know where and when, and I'll make fun of myself and include it in the next day's podcast. Sign up for a subscription if you haven't already. I can't do it without your support. It's free, but it costs a lot of money, and it's a lot of time. StandUpWithPete.com right now. John Carroll is a singer-songwriter, award-winning singer-songwriter, member of the Starlight Vocal Band. You know that song, Afternoon Delight. Well, he is a listener, subscriber, supporter, and really become a really good friend, and supported me more than I ever could him. Very happy to have him. Always want to make a big deal. John Carroll playing us out. Love you guys. Have a great weekend.
To let in some light, you gotta stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You gotta stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense, and you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town, just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Oh, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well, and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.